Good morning and welcome to Scotland Speaks at a regular time of 10 a.m. on a lovely Saturday morning in Glasgow. Now, it's been quite a couple of days and a shock by-election result for Labour, SNP, Reform and the Tories in the Hamilton by-election. Many predicted a different outcome. Many said it was a two-horse race which did not include the Labour Party, but the Labour Party have won. Therefore, that is a warning to all nationalists, all those seeking an independent Scotland, that in next year's election in 2026, on the list, it must be list vote Alba if we want to have a nationalist majority in Parliament next year. And even more importantly than that, that election, that list vote must be treated as a plebiscite election. Now, we discussed these issues and many more at Alba Party's National Council, which was held in Stirling last week. So in this week's show, we're going to take you to some of the excellent speeches. Over to the National Council in Stirling.
Conference Council, there's an old adage, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. And that's the situation that Scotland is in. Because in the 1970s, 80s and 90s, our massive oil energy bounty flowed south into the UK Treasury. And in the years 79 to 90 alone, when Thatcher was Prime Minister, that represented £60 billion, which at today's prices would be £200 billion. None of that resource came to Scotland. All of it was squandered and none of it was invested as it should have been in our public services, in eradicating poverty, in creating jobs in Scotland, in building social homes and in building and resourcing the infrastructure that our country needs. And now we face a second energy bounty which is flowing south in the form of offshore renewable wind. 124 billion kilowatt hours between now and 2030. That is the resource that will flow from Scotland directly into England. And there is this ongoing debate about whether Scotland is a colony or not. Historically, that case can be argued either way, but what is absolutely beyond question is that we are being fleeced of our own resources. And that 124 billion kilowatt hours is enough to power Scotland's homes 12.5 times over. And none of that resource is coming to Scotland. There will be no tax revenues, there are few direct or indirect jobs, and our environment is being damaged as a consequence. Now, Amy talked about Grangemouth, and she was absolutely right to highlight the abject failure of the SNP and Labour, two governments united in their absolute incompetence in saving the Grangemouth oil refinery. In which other country would you allow your major national economic asset to be closed? In which other oil-producing nation would you allow your oil refining capacity and your oil refinery to be shut down? And at the election in 24, people in Scotland understandably voted Labour to get rid of the Tories, and in Grangemouth and Falkirk they voted Labour to save the refinery. Now, Alba warned that it would be change in name only, but it's actually been worse than that. It has been a betrayal of the communities of Falkirk and Grangemouth. The Labour supporting Daily Record at the election had a front page which said, "Vote for a Labour government with Scotland at its beating heart." Well, tell that to the 400 workers at Grangemouth who have been cast aside. Tell that to the people of Falkirk and Grangemouth who have been betrayed. And tell that to the taxi drivers, the hairdressers, the small businesses who are now suffering as a result of the economic vandalism, to use the phrase coined by the General Secretary of Unite, the economic vandalism that has been foisted on those communities.
So as a wee reminder, there's 400 jobs already gone in Grangemouth. There's another 2,000 are still going to go after this. So it's still ongoing, it's still a live issue. The guys that are out just now have had some support, they've had some packages to reset on things, but the contractors have had nothing so far. Nothing's guaranteed. All numbers around the press are getting passed around, all these millions of pounds of funding. It's not come through yet. It's match funding. There's nothing to match it with, so it's not there. It's not real. We also know that in Aberdeen, we have a few hundred new civil service jobs to come up for the Energy Department, but there's thousands of jobs that are going to go into the North Sea, and it's due to the same actions. So we regret the lack of action and the supine opposition of the Scottish Government to the closure of the refinery and its unwillingness to fully support development in the North Sea. They're dithering about right now, and it's costing us the chance to get some money in place that we can use for the green transition. No one wants to use oil. It's dirty, it's nasty, but if we use what we've got, feed that into produced cleaner energy, that then gets us to where we have to be for the future.
We just require to sort out the mess. The workers at Greenock, the workers in Port Glasgow, the workers elsewhere in the Clyde, and indeed elsewhere in Scotland, can build these ships if they're given the orders. We're required to get rid of the suits in CMAL, Transport Scotland, and the Scottish Government has to sort this mess out. They have created this mess, they've got to sort it out, and they cannot crucify the workers or the communities. We have the absurdity at the present moment that when Jim and I went to see the shop stewards, do you know we almost have as many folk in lounge suits working in the Port Glasgow yard as folk in boiler suits. When they talk about putting in paintwork, they actually put it out to tender. Why does a shipyard put out to contractors for painters when it used to be a core part of what a shipyard did? So there's nothing wrong with the principle of the yard. It's been its operation and running out because it's a historic part of our past that we have to defend, but it's also part of our industrial future.
What was once a shipbuilding industry, the pride of the world, that was respected by every shipfaring nation around the globe, has become a poster child for incompetence and lack of capability. And it's not because the welders can't weld and the painters can't paint. They're as good as anyone on this planet, but they're being mismanaged and it has to stop. And that's why people like Jim McCall and the like, with vision, with capability, with competence, need to be put back in place, because the future opportunity is huge. It's there for ferries, for servicing offshore wind farms. The UK and Europe need 160 boats. That's right, 160. And all of them could be built here in Scotland, not just with the misused Ferguson yard, but what about the disgrace of Inch Green being kept mothballed and empty to fulfil a future dream for luxury houses and a marina to fill Peelport's pockets, when it could be building 2 of these vessels at a time in their dry dock? What a disgrace of a national asset, a total waste. So please, let's wake up, let's hold government to account here in Scotland, and let's start allowing our great shipbuilding workers and their families in the future to do what they do best. Thank you.
Our education system should open doors, not close them. It should serve learners, not markets. And it should be based on the ability to learn, not the ability to pay. So with this motion here, let us send a clear message. Reject the market-based funding models and invest not only in universities, but in the colleges, the apprenticeships, the training and reskilling that a modern Scotland needs. The current model is not sustainable, and that's clear. Cuts are being planned to jobs, to programmes and to schools in various universities in Scotland. But instead of pulling back on our commitment to our learners, we should be aiming for growth and further expansion of our higher education. With this, our focus should be on building a truly inclusive, lifelong learning system that recognises every single route, every learner and every contribution, which this amendment highlights, which is why I support it. Looking back, Scotland is an education system to be proud of. For example, we were the first country in the world to introduce universal school education, and we also have some of the oldest universities in the English-speaking world. Looking forward, let us defend not just education, but the future of Scotland itself. As a very wise man, Alex Salmond, once said, "The rocks will melt with the sun before I allow tuition fees to be imposed on Scottish students." And he may not be here to see that through, but you can be damn sure we will, for him and for Scotland. Thank you.
I don't know about you, but I was embarrassed this week to see our Parliament be turned into a joke. Patrick Harvey and I clearly have very different views on what constitutes an urgent question. For me, an urgent question would be, why are some elderly and disabled women in Scotland having to reject receiving vital personal care in the community because they're only being offered male care staff to provide this intimate personal care. And what are we going to do to stop it happening? That would be an urgent question. For Patrick Harvey, an urgent question is asking about Holyrood toilets, followed up by his co-leader asking how she can prove that she is a woman. Shameful to watch and cringe-worthy performative politics on show within our Parliament. These people were not elected to turn Holyrood into a laughingstock. What we witnessed this week tells us more than ever that it's vital that we get adults back into our Parliament, that we get back to good governance. And I believe that this motion is a step in the right direction in proving to the people of Scotland that we here in Alba are the adults, and in 2026 they must put us in that room. Please support the motion.
It's interesting also that most of the debate has focused on access to toilets, but there are many much more serious examples of how safety is compromised when men gain access to women-only spaces. 12 rapes and 288 sexual assaults reported in Scottish hospitals and day clinics over a 5-year period. The actual number significantly higher, but much of that data just unavailable. Male-bodied individuals still in the women's prison estate with little regard for the safety of women incarcerated alongside them. Women and girls avoiding gym and sports changing rooms due to the fear of lack of privacy. And many women, like Sandy Peggy, faced with having to accept men in their spaces or have their livelihoods threatened, finding, like Sandy, no support even from their own trade union. This week, the Scottish Government have issued refreshed guidance for public bodies, and about time too. They really must start to show their true political leadership and ensure that guidance is fully enforced. We call on the Scottish Government to ensure consistent application of equality legislation wherever applicable. Both public and private bodies should be taking steps to ensure they're compliant without any further delay. Ignorance is not an excuse for ignoring the law. We cannot permit this pretense that the ruling is in some way unclear or the guidance outdated to allow the law to be flouted by stealth. Protecting women's rights is fundamental to the fair and equal independent Scotland we all want to see without delay. The Scottish Government have an opportunity to show their leadership and ensure the equality legislation is correctly applied. Delegates, please support this motion.
I am a teacher in a secondary school. No coincidence that I am a biology teacher. But gender issues have become very, very topical within the educational setting and within conversation with young people as well. So I would say from a professional perspective, staff are very much walking on eggshells around this scenario that we have. I would say there's been no official guidance given to professionals that work in the educational sector from the local authority, perhaps because the Scottish Government cannot apply their position on this already. And actually, when we look at what the Supreme Court have said, no legislation has actually been changed. It's merely just that we've had a wrong interpretation of the legislation for so long that we now can't get rid of this false interpretation that's been so ingrained into society for the last wee while.
Coming up after the break, we have a treat in store for you because we are going to hear from the ABBA Party's oldest member, the wonderful Willie MacRobbie from the Highlands, who is 100 years old and will be celebrating his 101st birthday in October of this year. We shall see you after the break. Welcome back to Scotland Speaks, and as promised, it is the time of our oldest member, the Alba Party's oldest member, Willie MacRobbie, who came to the National Council in Stirling. Such a nationalist he is, and so determined to see independence in his lifetime. He will be 101 years old in October. Here's what he had to say to our National Council.
That's the best welcome I've ever had in my life.
You've got the police coming and everything, Willie. You haven't even started yet.
Well, I had no intention of saying anything here today at all, until Mr McCaskill brought up the question of shipping on the Clyde. I served my apprenticeship during the war on the Clyde as an engineer. And then I went to sea, 10 years in the Clan Line. And in every port you went into, from Boston to Calcutta, there was not just one British ship, but the majority of ships were Clyde built. And today, McBrains go to Turkey to get some ferries built. The world's going crazy, or Scotland has anyway. And I'm hoping that if and when, perhaps not if, when, we get a real hold of things in Scotland, that things will change. Another thing that annoys me, they closed the oil refinery. They had the chance to nationalise it. We've got the raw material a few yards out in the North Sea, and the refinery that needed upgrading, no doubt, but you had the raw material, you had the means of, and they go and close the refinery. I don't know. I think I've lived too long.
No, you have not long enough.
That's all I've got to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Willie was, of course, a tough act to follow, but we had many great speeches from many of our National Council members. So back to National Council, where we discussed a variety of different topics.
If we ever justify bombing civilians and children, whether in the name of resistance or reprisal, we are saying that such acts should be permissible for anyone, anywhere. That we know in our bones is not right. Terrorist attacks that targets innocents are morally indefensible, but so too are military operations that unleash indiscriminate destruction, trapping civilians in cycles of fear, injury and death. Whether it is Hamas's incursions or Netanyahu's government's relentless bombardment of Gaza, when innocents become instruments of political or military strategy, we lose all moral grounding. Ethics doesn't care what flag you wave. It cares that we uphold the dignity of all human life. And by that standard, we must condemn violence against civilians wherever it comes from. Arguments of moral equivalence, collateral damage, or self-defence are as hollow as they are absurd. The ideologically driven actions of the Netanyahu government, blocking aid, denying food, water and power, while simultaneously inflicting military bombardment on a defenceless people, do not constitute self-defence. As the International Court of Justice has already suggested, they may constitute genocide. So, Alba steadfastly calls for an immediate ceasefire to end the genocide and allow vital aid unimpeded into Gaza. The unconditional release of all remaining hostages in line with UN Security Council Resolution 2728. The full support for the Madrid Group's call for international sanctions on Israel to end the suffering. And once again, we call on the UK government to immediately halt all arms sales and military support to Israel. The ICJ has found it plausible that Israel's actions may amount to genocide. But the Jewish Voice for Rabbinical Council, the Jewish Voice for Peace Rabbinical Council has condemned the continuing violence against Palestinians and those nations that support and enable it. And so once again, as I did in Parliament, I echo their words again today. If never again is to mean anything at all, it must mean never again for anyone, anywhere. Thank you.
Chair, delegates, members, here today I'm with a message that's as clear as it's urgent. Scotland's economy is being failed by both the UK and Scottish governments. The UK government's already shown its hand. It's negotiated trade deals with the USA and the EU that sold Scotland out with no consultation, no engagement, and certainly no consent from the people of Scotland. They handed over access to our fishing waters to the EU until 2038, and in the US deal, increased tariffs on our whisky, damaging one of our most iconic national industries. And in Holyrood, as we've heard already so much today, Scottish Government's not much better. Its withdrawal of support for oil and gas with no credible transition plan has already put thousands of jobs at risk. And as we heard so well before, its silence on Grangemouth, Scotland's last refinery, speaks volumes, when it should have fought with every breath to preserve that vital site of national energy resilience. It looked the other way. And the debacle of Ferguson's and the ferries, bringing never-ending shame and embarrassment to a shipbuilding industry that was once revered the world over. Both governments, UK and Scotland alike, are presiding over the managed decline of Scotland's economy. This cannot continue. That's why we bring this motion today to call for the immediate establishment of a working group on economic policy. Not a talking shop, not a shallow paper exercise, but a serious, strategic and inclusive process that reaches out across every part of our economy: manufacturing, energy, agriculture, fisheries, tech, tourism, hospitality, care and more. And its job to deliver a national industrial strategy, one that rebuilds what we've lost and builds new pathways to prosperity. To listen to our communities, engage with workers and businesses, and develop real-world proposals to build an economy that is sovereign, sustainable and strong. Because here's the truth: Scotland has every asset it needs to succeed, and way more than that. We've got world-class resources, we've got skilled, innovative and resilient people, and we've a proud industrial transition and the chance here today to revive it for generations to come. But we must act with real purpose and real urgency. Let's make sure that Scotland's future sits in Scotland's hands.
And with that, we come to the end of this week's show. In next week's show, we will hear from Steve Chisholm, some of whose speeches you have heard in today's show, but he is our candidate for Comity Firth by-election up in the Highlands. So we can look forward to hearing from Steve with some great stories to tell about Alex as well. But until then, it's bye-bye from me, but I will leave you with a very important video as to why you must vote. List Vote Alba if you want an independent Scotland and if you want to treat the elections next year as a plebiscite on independence. Over to the video. Bye-bye from me. See you next week.
Here's how the Scottish elections work in 2 minutes. Scotland is split up into 8 regions. Each region has around 9 local constituency MSPs that you vote for using your lilac-coloured ballot paper. This vote is simple. The candidate with the highest vote in each constituency wins the seat. Each region then has to elect another 7 MSPs on what's called the regional list. These 7 are elected using your peach-coloured ballot paper. Here you vote for one party. Each party's votes are counted up and then they are divided by the number of seats that party has already won, plus 1. For example, in 2021, the SNP won 9 constituency seats in the North East. The 148,000 votes they got on the regional list were divided by 10, giving them just under 15,000 votes. The other 133,000 votes were wasted. This meant the SNP did not win a single seat on the regional list in the northeast of Scotland. Despite getting the most votes in every region, the SNP only won 2 of 56 regional list seats up for grabs, with unionist parties picking up 46 of them. If, however, SNP voters had decided to back Alba on the regional list instead, the 46 seats won by unionist parties would have been cut to 24. The SNP would have sacrificed just 2 single seats, and in return, the second largest party would have been the pro-independence Alba Party with 30 seats. It would have been an independent supermajority in the Scottish Parliament. In 2026, don't waste your vote. Vote Alba on the regional list.